Welcome to ILTV's Israel Daily. I'm Lital Shemesh, and coming up in today's newscast, the U.S. responds to the final draft of the Iranian nuclear deal. Meanwhile, thousands of Jewish pilgrims brave the Russian invasion of Ukraine for their annual trip to Uman. And finally, step away from the Splenda. Israeli scientists explain why artificial sweeteners are just not safe to eat. The U.S. has finally responded to the EU's final draft for the renewed Iran nuclear deal, but the agreement isn't signed yet, and Israel is still doing everything to stop it. ILTV's Aaron Porras reports.
The United States responding to the final draft of the revised JCPOA Iran nuclear deal, and officials are saying the conclusion is closer than ever, but there are still some things to work out. Israel then using every last second before the deal is signed to kill it. Prime Minister Lapid, for one, saying it's not that Israel is against a deal per se, but that this bad deal cannot be accepted as written.
On the table right now is a bad deal. It would give Iran $100 billion a year. This money will not build schools or hospitals. This is $100 billion a year that will be used to undermine stability in the Middle East and spread terror around the globe.
Further, Lapid explaining that the removal of sanctions on sectors like Iran's financial institutions, which today are designated as supporting terror groups, means Tehran will easily be able to launder money, including for other nations facing sanctions like Russia. And in the end, Lapid warns that the pact won't even prevent Iran's nuclear breakout. But all that said, the White House is reportedly screening Israel's calls, saying Biden is on vacation and will respond to concerns soon. So as always, Israel is maintaining its right to act independently, rhetoric that's taking on new meaning following recent revelations. According to Saudi media outlet Elaf, armed Israeli stealth fighter jets breaking into Iranian airspace multiple times over the last few months, and neither Iranian nor Russian radars picked up the signal. Allegedly, the flights are part of a large-scale joint military exercise between Israel and the U.S., and an unnamed Arab source telling Elaf that the drills prove how Israel will receive support if it decides to strike Iranian facilities, and even if it's after a deal is reached with Tehran.
We have made it clear to everyone, if a deal is signed, it does not obligate Israel. We will act to prevent Iran from becoming a nuclear state. We are not prepared to live with a nuclear threat above our heads from an extremist, violent Islamist regime.
Now, in related news, Western diplomats are exposing an alleged swap agreement between Iran and Russia, in which Iran would help Russia avoid oil sanctions after signing the JCPOA. Joining me on this and more, CEO and founder of the Israel Defense and Security Forum, Brigadier General Reserves Amir Avivi. Hello, thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Hello.
So if sanctions on Iran are lifted, can Russia really use Iran to launder money?
Definitely. I think that this process has been prepared for a very long time. I think that Russia, Iran, China, they understand that the West, although it has huge military power, has zero willingness to use it. And the West's only real weapon on the table is sanctions. And therefore, since the operation in Crimea, Russia has worked together with Iran, also the Chinese, to really think how they're going to win this battle on sanctions. Russia made a lot of preparations, and we can see that they're actually winning. When you look at the ruble, it is at highest point in the last few years. Since the beginning of the operation, it doubled itself. The economy of Russia is growing. The debts the national debt of Russia is less than 1/5 than the US debt. It's 19%. So definitely they are thinking how to bypass the sanctions, and signing this agreement will enable Russia to launder money, to sell oil to Iran, and then Iran will sell its all oil to the east and to the west.
So, Amir, if Tehran and Moscow try this swap, wouldn't Western sanctions on Russia extend it to Iran?
No, it won't happen because the West wants to appease Iran. This agreement they're going to sign is a complete surrender to Iran, and they're going to close their eyes like they did for the last few years when Iran started selling oil again. Today, when you send a ship with oil, this ship can change 10 times on the way the flag. It's the sea is a complete chaos. It's very hard to monitor that, and I don't think they'll have the willingness to really try and deal with Iran unless we'll see in 2 years a change of regime, a change of administration in the US. And then maybe things will be different.
Mm-hmm. While Russians' interest with the JCPOA clearly doesn't line up with the US or Europe, but what about China? What does Xi Jinping want from the deal?
Well, the Chinese want to extend their ability to build a new Silk Way. They want to be able to move their goods through Iran, to Iraq, to Jordan, and even to Israel. In some ways, there is a huge fight over how will be the flow of goods through the Middle East, whether it will be as Biden envisions it and before Trump, through UAE, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, and Israel, or through Iran. The Chinese signed a 25 years agreement with Iran. They are investing huge amounts of money. They see this country as an opportunity and a door to the West. And this is what the Chinese care. And they're also learning carefully the issue of sanctions, because if they will decide to attack Taiwan, definitely, if they can really deal well with the sanctions, they will do that.
Yes, and could a deal die because of these side deals, or how much attention is the West paying to these reports?
So we see that the West wants the deal at any cost. At any cost, this deal is a terrible deal. At the end of the day, the deal will do two main things. One, it will assure that Iran will be nuclear, because the deal itself says that when it ends, basically Iran can enrich indefinite amount of uranium, which means that they can move in weeks to become a huge nuclear power. And the other thing is that this was mentioned by Lapid, the Minister of Israel, is that they will get $100 billion, and they will use this money to equip the militias and completely destabilize the Middle East. When Obama, same thing.
Yeah, which is horrible. So I want to ask you to conclude, do you think it is at all possible that Israel will convince Washington to back out so close to ending this deal?
At this stage, I must say I'm not optimistic. I'm pessimistic. I think that the Europeans and the Americans want to get this done. It seems to me too late. I think that the Israeli government should have been much more strong on this issue. In the last year, we hardly heard the government talking about that. If I was the Prime Minister of Israel, I would put a tent outside of Vienna and stay there until I break this deal down. It's existential for Israel. Yeah. And the fact that now our Prime Minister doesn't even manage to have a phone call with the President of the US, this is very bad news for Israel and where we are in this scenario.
Yeah, they started maybe too little, too late. Brigadier General Reserves Amir Avivi, thank you so much for this interview.
Thank you very much.
Moving on, in spite of serious warnings, a travel ban, and an ongoing war, thousands of ultra-Orthodox Jews are still planning to fly to Ukraine for their annual pilgrimage to Uman. ILTV's Kayla Eberlin with more.
The Russian invasion of Ukraine now entering its 7th month, and there's still no signs of slowing. But in spite of violence, specific travel warnings, Ukraine's general ban on tourism, some 50 charter flights still booked to bring over 1,000 ultra-Orthodox Jews into the country. Rosh Hashanah, or the Jewish New Year, coming in a month from today, and every year thousands of ultra-Orthodox Jews head to Ukraine for the holiday. The masses of Haredim making the pilgrimage to Uman, where famed religious leader Rabbi Nachman of Bratslav is buried. In fact, Uman is used to receiving some 30,000 pilgrims around the New Year, mainly from Israel, and many locals even learning Hebrew, as the city's economy has grown to rely on the visitors and their business. But again, while people in Uman saying the city is far from the front lines and generally open to host, Ukrainian officials saying they cannot guarantee security. Just this past Wednesday, on Ukraine's 31st Independence Day, Russian forces launching a rocket attack on a train station in eastern Ukraine, resulting in at least 22 people killed and 50 being wounded.
2011.
Просто був в домі?
Да.
Я не знімаю вас.
Да. Він в домі був, це його викинули. Ми там розвалля шукали, це все, а він тут лежав. Ніхто не знав, що він тут лежить. Ніхто не знав. Думали, може, на кришу викинули, а оказується, ось він тут. Якби з самого початку час він тут лежав, ніхто не знав, що він тут лежить.
Чали на наш біль сьогодні, станом на цю хвилину 22 загиблих, з них 5 людей згоріли в машині. Загинув підліток, йому було 11. Російська ракета зруйнувала його будинок. Змусимо окупантів відповісти за все це, що вони наробили, і обов'язково викинемо загарбників з нашої землі. Жодної плями цього зла не залишиться у нашій вільній Україні.
In other news, following recent conflicts and terror attacks in Israel, analysts are saying that the enemy's ideology is becoming more and more religiously extreme and that Israel needs to evolve to address the threat. Joining me to explain, reporter and analyst Amin Ayub. Hello, thank you for joining us.
Hi.
So where do you see the threats becoming more religiously extreme?
So basically, this year, as every other year, Israel was again under attack. But the assailants this year were kind of different from before. And ISIS actually showed up in Israel. And actually, ISIS took credit for some of the attacks back in March. And this is actually the first time that ISIS actually credits itself with attacks against Israel and the Israelis. And throughout the years, actually, the Islamic State did not actually put Israel on its enemies list. But lately, we can see that it's interested in Israel. Also, the latest attacks this past month, the rocket attacks against Israel from Gaza, were not actually made by Hamas, but actually by the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, which actually an extremist religious movement.
Yeah, although for us in Israel, I mean, Hamas and Islamic Jihad is more of the same.
Or actually, when you look at their history, and this is an article I wrote lately, they actually have the same grounds of ideologies from the Muslim Brotherhood from Egypt, but they differ in their goals, as Hamas actually has a social impact goal in Gaza, and the Islamic Jihad is more violent and more. Actually, it doesn't see a peaceful solution to the conflict between Palestine and Israel. It only sees violence as the only solution.
Mm-hmm. Although, I mean, Hamas also is declaring for the annihilation of the state of Israel.
It is, but I think that they're changing their stance. And lately, they've been thinking twice before actually attacking Israel. because of their because they think about all the sanctions and other things that's happened afterwards.
Do you think that we're going to see this extremism also happening in Europe?
Yeah, we will see. I think that we will see more extremist movements in Europe because of the economic impact of the war and between Russia and Ukraine, and specifically within the immigrant communities. This is where usually the extremist movements actually rise. And we can see this in some of the Scandinavian countries where actually they're having problems with these communities. And I have a feeling that we might see some of these extremist movements getting into these communities and spreading their hate and violence.
Mm-hmm. And you say that Israel needs to adopt alongside the threat. Is Israel doing anything to address this, in your opinion?
Well, in my opinion, I think Israel was not actually ready for this new type of lone wolves that actually commit violent crimes against the state of Israel. And I think it needs to change this strategy. The enemies are actually changing, and Iran actually is using many different proxies to actually get to its goal.
Analyst Amin Ayub, thank you so much for this interview.
Thank you.
Food science never seems to be settled, with experts flipping their opinions every few years. But now Israeli researchers are saying to put down the Splenda and the stevia because artificial sweeteners are simply bad for your health. ILTV's Aaron Poris with the details.
Stevia, Splenda, sucralose, sweet and low. There's an infinite collage of artificial sweeteners designed and marketed as a healthier option to big bad sugar. But Israeli researchers at the Weizmann Institute of Science are now confirming their decade-old warning that artificial sweeteners are bad news for the body and should not be assumed safe. The scientists monitoring dozens of adults for over 8 years' time, and according to the peer-reviewed study published last week in the journal Cell, fake sugars like saccharin, aspartame, stevia, and sucralose wreak havoc on our body's microbiome, which in turn damages the body's ability to naturally dispose of glucose. And in the end, this actually increases the sugar levels in the body. So basically, as argued in 2014 following their study on rodents, sugar substitutes may have directly contributed to enhancing the exact epidemic that they themselves were intended to fight, and they should not be assumed safe until proven otherwise.
Now we all want a good education for ourselves and for our families, but sometimes we need some help, especially in the US, where the cost of private schools can cost as much as a university. Joining me with how the Chinuch Yehudi organization helped change their lives, 16-year-old student at the College Academy in Florida, Moshe Goren, and his father, Isaac. Hello, thank you for joining me.
Thank you for the invitation.
So how long were you in public school before making the change, and what made you change in the first place?
So at first, for the first 6 years, so from first grade to sixth grade, I was in public schools. And then I decided I wanted to embrace my Judaism in me. So I decided to go to a Jewish school, and it helped me a lot.
Also, it became available, the school, the Chinuch Yehudi, helped different families to get into a Jewish education, especially families where the kids had some anti-Semitism beforehand.
Mm-hmm. And Moshe, what do you think of your new school and community?
It's very nice. The campus is very big. I have a lot of breaks. I have a lot of time to myself. The homework is easy. The classes are good. Teachers are very nice.
Mm-hmm. And would you suggest others to follow your lead?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Isaac, what about you? How has your life changed since Moshe moved to the College Academy?
Well, it was very moving. I remember we were in Passover, Pesach, and reading the Haggadah around the table, and then we get to Moshe, and it was 6 months after he started school, and he started reading in Hebrew. So that was very moving for me, which he wasn't able to read Hebrew before. We love that the kids learn about halakha, they learn to pray, to laniach tefillin. So this is I think this is something that every Jew, every Israeli should have under their belt.
And I think it's a real problem. I mean, the price of education for Jewish people in America, especially now after those 2 harsh years of COVID.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, education is very expensive in private school. However, there are few scholarships that are made it possible for a lot of families, and that's kind of saving a lot of families and helping them to get into Jewish education.
Mm-hmm. And what help did you get from Chinuch Yehudi to make this move?
So you have a couple of different scholarships. One of them is Chinuch Yehudi. Also, the government is giving another scholarship, which make it possible for families to attend the school. But Chinuch Yehudi was pushing through to bring, they actually started the whole thing. They started by bringing families together and helping them getting the Jewish education.
Mm-hmm. And can you elaborate a little bit? Yeah, we're with you.
What I'm saying is that they are pioneers. They had the thought, and they started with few families, kindergarten, and then from kindergarten, it was like for ages 2, 3, and 4, then age 5, 6, 7, and then every year they opened more and more and more, and added more students, and got to a bigger campus.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned anti-Semitism, and we know that's a growing problem around the States, especially now after those 2 years of COVID. And how does this facilities of Chinuch Yehudi helps you fighting that?
It's making the kids safe. You want to send your kid to school, and you don't want them to be bullied by teachers and being exposed to anti-Semitism. One of the schools had the picture of Hitler on the wall, and when we asked the teacher what's that about, and she said, "Oh, he was a great leader." And so, of course, it took some fighting and contacting the governor in Florida, and they took the picture down. But it's prevalent.
Wow, that's really harsh to hear, especially for us in Israel, that those things are still happening there.
Yeah, definitely.
Wow. Well, it's good to hear that you're fighting back. Moshe, Isaac, best of luck for both of you. Thank you so much for speaking with us.
Thank you for having us.
Now let's take a look at the weather forecast. Clear skies tonight with lows averaging around 23 degrees Celsius or 74 Fahrenheit. Then tomorrow, seeing more clear and sunny skies across the country with top temperatures reaching 36 Celsius or 97 degrees Fahrenheit. And on Saturday, the hot weather turning up a notch with temperatures ranging from mid to high 30s. That's all for today's news. For more updates from Israel on all your devices, check out our website, ILTV.tv, and subscribe to our newsletter, as well as our streaming platform, ILTV Plus. I'm Lital Shemesh. Be well, and thank you for watching.